I was holding the envelope when I realized my hands were shaking. The cream-colored paper I'd spent 20 minutes picking out at Target was there in my mailbox, but it looked different now, dirty. There was a red stamp across the front that said, "Return to sender," in block letters. And underneath it, in Linda's perfect handwriting, the word, "refused." My graduation invitation, the one I'd agonized over sending for 3 weeks. The olive branch I thought might finally fix what had been broken between us for 4 years. She'd sent it back without even opening it. I stood there in the apartment complex parking lot in Phoenix, holding this piece of paper that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My neighbor Mrs. Chen was getting her mail too, and she looked at me funny because I was just standing there, staring, but I couldn't move. I couldn't process what I was seeing. Linda had been my stepmom for 12 years. 12 years of trying to win her approval, of walking on eggshells, of pretending everything was normal when it never, ever was. And now this. I need to back up. I need to explain how we got here, because nobody just sends back a graduation invitation for no reason, right? There has to be a story. There always is. My dad married Linda when I was 13. My mom had died 2 years before that. And I think Dad was just desperate not to be alone anymore. I get that now. Back then, I was just a kid who missed her mom and wanted someone to fill that empty space at the dinner table. Linda seemed perfect at first. She was pretty in that put-together way that made other moms jealous. She worked as a dental hygienist and always smelled like that minty stuff they used to clean your teeth. She brought casseroles to our house before they got married, and she laughed at all of Dad's stupid jokes. She even bought me a necklace for my 14th birthday, a little silver heart that I wore every day for months. But things changed after the wedding. It was subtle at first. Little comments about how I left dishes in the sink, or how I was too loud when I talked on the phone. She'd say things like, "Your mother would have wanted you to be more responsible," and I'd feel this stab of guilt because how could I argue with that? How could I dishonor my mom's memory by being messy or loud? The comments got sharper over time when I got a B+ on a math test. She'd say, "I'm sure you could have done better if you'd studied harder." When I wanted to hang out with friends, she'd remind me that I had chores to do first. When I asked Dad if I could go to summer camp, she'd jump in with, "We can't afford luxuries right now, Kiara. Maybe you should get a job instead." I was 15 when she had Emma. Suddenly there was this perfect little baby in the house, and Linda transformed into this glowing, nurturing mother, but only for Emma. With me, she was still cold, still critical, still finding fault in everything I did. I remember one night when Emma was maybe 6 months old. I was trying to help by giving her a bottle. Linda came into the kitchen and saw me holding her daughter, and the look on her face was pure panic. Like I was going to hurt the baby or something. "I'll take her," she said, practically ripping Emma out of my arms. "You don't know how to hold her right." I'd been babysitting neighbor kids since I was 12. I knew how to hold a baby, but Linda acted like I was some kind of threat to her perfect child. That's when I started to understand. I wasn't her daughter. I was never going to be her daughter. I was just this leftover piece of Dad's old life that she had to tolerate. Dad didn't see it, or maybe he didn't want to see it. When I tried to talk to him about how Linda treated me, he'd get this tired look in his eyes and say things like, "She's adjusting, Kiara. We all are. Give her time." But time didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. When I was 16, I wanted to get my driver's license. All my friends were driving, and I'd saved up money from my part-time job at the movie theater to pay for the classes myself. But Linda convinced Dad that I wasn't responsible enough. She brought up every mistake I'd ever made, the time I forgot to lock the front door, the time I left my curling iron plugged in, the time I was 10 minutes late for curfew because my friend's car broke down. "She's not ready for that kind of responsibility," Linda told Dad, while I sat at the kitchen table, listening to them decide my fate. "What if she gets in an accident? What if she hurts someone? We'd be liable." Dad caved. He always caved when it came to Linda, so I had to wait until I was 18 and could do it myself. Do you know how humiliating it is to be the only senior in high school who still has to ask for rides everywhere? But the worst part wasn't the license. It was watching how different Linda was with Emma. When Emma turned 3, Linda threw her this elaborate princess party with a bounce house and a pony. When I turned 17, Linda forgot completely. Dad remembered at the last minute and took me to Applebee's, just the two of us. while Linda stayed home with Emma because someone needs to watch the baby. I started counting down the days until I could leave for college. I'd gotten into Arizona State with a partial scholarship, and I was planning to study education because I wanted to be the kind of teacher who actually cared about kids who felt invisible. Kids like me. The summer before I left, things got really bad. Linda started making these comments about how expensive college was, how maybe I should consider community college instead, how Dad was already stretched thin financially. She'd say these things when Dad wasn't around, and then when he was there, she'd be all supportive and encouraging. "We're so proud of Kiara," she'd tell him. "College is such a big step." But then she'd pull me aside later and say things like, "I hope you realize how much your father is sacrificing for this. Emma's going to need college money too, you know." I felt guilty all the time. Guilty for existing. Guilty for costing money. Guilty for taking up space in a house where I clearly wasn't wanted. The night before I left for college, Linda knocked on my bedroom door. I thought maybe she was going to say something nice. Maybe she was going to tell me she'd miss me or wish me luck. Instead, she handed me a bill. "This is what you owe for groceries and utilities for the past year," she said. "I think it's fair that you start paying your own way." The bill was for $3,000. $3,000 for eating food and using electricity in the house where I lived. The house where my father lived. The house where I was supposed to be family. I stared at that piece of paper and something inside me just broke. Not in a dramatic way, more like a quiet snap. Like when you bend a plastic ruler too far and it just gives up. "I'll pay you back," I said. "Because what else could I say?" "I know you will," Linda replied. "You're responsible like that." But her tone said the opposite. Her tone said she thought I was a burden who would probably never pay her back, who would probably fail at college, who would probably come crawling home and make her life difficult again. I moved out the next day. Dad helped me load my stuff into his truck, and he seemed sad but also relieved, like he was tired of being caught in the middle. Linda stayed inside with Emma, and when Dad went to say goodbye to them, I heard Emma crying and asking why Daddy was sad. College was hard at first, not the classes, but the loneliness. I'd call home every week, and Dad would put me on speaker so I could talk to Emma too. She was 4 by then, and she'd tell me about preschool and her friends and the new toys Linda bought her. Linda would be polite but distant during these calls. She'd ask about my grades and my classes, but it felt like she was reading from a script. I came home for Thanksgiving that first year, and it was awkward. Linda had redecorated my old room as a playroom for Emma. All my stuff was boxed up in the garage. When I asked Dad about it, he said Linda thought it would be good to give Emma more space to play. "Where am I supposed to sleep when I visit?" I asked. "The couch is comfortable," Linda said from the kitchen. "It's just for a few days." That's when I realized I didn't live there anymore. Not really, I was a guest now, an unwelcome guest. I stopped coming home as much after that. I'd make excuses about work or school projects. Dad would sound disappointed, but he never pushed, and Linda never asked me to reconsider. The breaking point came during my sophomore year. Dad called me on a Tuesday night, which was weird because he usually called on Sundays. His voice sounded strange, shaky. "Kiara, I need to tell you something," he said. "Linda and I are getting divorced." I was shocked. Not because I thought they were happy, but because Dad had seemed so committed to making it work. He'd chosen Linda over me so many times that I figured he'd keep choosing her forever. "What happened?" I asked. Dad was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She wants me to choose between you and her. She says she can't have you in our lives anymore. She says you're a bad influence on Emma." A bad influence, me. The girl who'd never gotten in trouble, who worked 2 jobs to pay for college, who called home every week to check on everyone. I was a bad influence. "What did you tell her?" I asked. Even though I was afraid of the answer, I told her that "You're my daughter," Dad said, and his voice cracked. "I told her that I love you and I'm not giving up on you, so she's leaving. She's taking Emma and moving back to her mother's house in Tucson." I should have felt relieved. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt guilty, like I'd broken up my dad's marriage, like I'd taken Emma away from her father, like everything Linda had ever said about me being a burden was true. Dad tried to get joint custody of Emma, but Linda fought him hard. She had a good lawyer and a sob story about how Dad had chosen his troubled older daughter over his innocent little girl. She painted me as this destructive force who'd torn their family apart. The custody hearing was brutal. I wasn't allowed to testify. But I sat in the back of the courtroom and listened to Linda describe me like I was some kind of criminal. She talked about how I'd been resentful and difficult from the beginning, how I'd never accepted her as a mother figure, how I'd manipulated Dad into taking my side against her. None of it was true, but she said it all with tears in her eyes, and Emma sitting right there beside her. Emma, who was only 6 and didn't understand why Daddy looked so sad. Dad got visitation rights every other weekend and 1 evening a week, but Linda made it difficult. She'd schedule Emma's activities during Dad's time. She'd claim Emma was sick when she wasn't. She'd move without telling Dad her new address, and then act like it was an honest mistake. I watched my father fall apart over the next 2 years. He aged 10 years in 24 months. He started drinking more. He stopped taking care of himself. He'd call me crying about how much he missed Emma, and I'd feel responsible even though I knew it wasn't my fault. I tried to stay out of it. I focused on school and work and building my own life, but it was hard to move forward when I felt like I'd destroyed everything behind me. Then Dad got sick. Cancer, pancreatic cancer, which is basically a death sentence. He was diagnosed in January of my senior year, and the doctors said he had maybe 6 months. I dropped out of school immediately and moved back to Phoenix to take care of him. I didn't even think about it. He was my dad, and he was dying, and I wasn't going to let him go through that alone. Linda brought Emma to see him a few times in the beginning, but the visits were tense and awkward. Emma barely remembered Dad, and she was scared of the hospital equipment and how thin he'd gotten. Linda would stand in the corner checking her phone while Emma sat stiffly in the chair next to Dad's bed, not knowing what to say. After the 3rd visit, Linda stopped coming. She said it was too traumatic for Emma. She said Dad needed to focus on getting better, not on upsetting a little girl. Dad died in June, 2 weeks before I was supposed to graduate. I'd been planning to finish my degree online while taking care of him, but his condition deteriorated faster than anyone expected. I spent his last 3 days holding his hand and reading him stories from the books he used to read to me when I was little. Linda came to the funeral with Emma. Emma was 8 by then, and she looked so much like Dad, it made my chest hurt. She cried during the service, and I wanted to comfort her, but Linda kept her close and wouldn't let me near. After the burial, Linda came up to me in the parking lot. I thought maybe she was going to say something kind. Maybe she was going to acknowledge that we'd both lost someone important. Instead, she said, "I hope you're happy now. You got what you wanted." I stared at her. What I wanted. "You wanted him all to yourself," she said. "You couldn't stand that he had another family, so you poisoned him against us. And now he's gone, and Emma barely got to know her father." I was so shocked I couldn't even respond. How do you respond to something like that? How do you defend yourself against an accusation so twisted and cruel? Linda walked away before I could find words. She took Emma's hand and led her to their car, and I watched them drive away knowing I'd probably never see my little sister again. That was 4 years ago. 4 years of silence. 4 years of wondering if Linda was right. If I really had been selfish and destructive. If Dad would still be alive if I'd just stayed away and let them be a family. I went back to school that fall and finished my degree. I became a teacher, just like I'd planned. I work at an elementary school in Phoenix, and I love my kids. I love being the adult who notices when a child feels invisible. I love being the person who makes sure no kid gets left behind. But I never stopped thinking about Emma. I never stopped wondering what Linda had told her about me, whether she remembered me at all, whether she knew she had a sister who thought about her every day. Last month, I decided to try one more time. I was graduating with my master's degree in education, and I thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe Linda would be willing to let Emma know that I existed, that I cared about her, that I wanted to be part of her life. So I sent the invitation. I wrote a letter to go with it, explaining that I'd gotten my master's degree, and that I was thinking about Emma and hoping she was doing well. I said I'd love to hear from them, even just a quick update about how Emma was doing in school. I spent forever writing that letter. I rewrote it probably 10 times, trying to find the right tone, not too desperate, not too demanding, just hopeful, just reaching out. I mailed it to Linda's mother's address in Tucson, which was the last address I had for them. I put extra postage on it to make sure it would get there. I used my best handwriting on the envelope, and then I waited. 3 weeks later, it came back, unopened. Refused. Like I was some kind of stalker or threat. Like my invitation to my own graduation was something dangerous that needed to be returned to sender. I sat in my car in that parking lot, holding that envelope, and I finally understood something I'd been too young to see before. This was never about me being difficult or resentful or a bad influence. This was about Linda needing to erase me completely. She couldn't be Emma's only mother as long as I existed as Dad's daughter. She couldn't rewrite their family story with me still in the picture, so she'd made me disappear. First from their house, then from Dad's life, and now from Emma's memory. I was the inconvenient truth that didn't fit her narrative. The worst part is that it worked. Emma is 12 now. She probably doesn't remember me at all. If Linda has done her job right, Emma thinks she was Dad's only child. She thinks I never existed. And maybe that's for the best. Maybe Emma is better off not knowing she has a sister who was erased. Maybe she's better off thinking her family was simple and uncomplicated. But I know the truth. I know that love doesn't disappear just because someone refuses to acknowledge it. I know that family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates, or who gets to stay and who gets sent away. I kept that returned envelope. I put it in a box with the few pictures I have of Dad and Emma together. Someday, if Emma ever comes looking for me, she'll have proof that I tried. She'll know that I never stopped caring, even when caring felt like holding on to broken glass. And if she never comes looking, that's okay too. Because I finally understand that Linda's rejection isn't about my worth. It's about her fear, her need to control the story, her inability to love a child who reminded her that she wasn't Dad's first choice. I can't change what happened. I can't bring Dad back or force Linda to let me know Emma, but I can stop carrying the guilt that was never mine to carry. I can stop believing that I was the problem. I can finally let go of the weight of her rejection and the shame that came with it. That night, I sat on my bed and opened my laptop. I started writing a letter to Emma, one that I might never send. I wanted her to know about the sister she never met. I wanted her to know that I loved her from the moment I heard about her. I wanted her to know that she was never a burden to me, that she was a light in a world that felt so dark sometimes. I wrote about our dad, about the silly things he used to do to make us laugh, about how he would sing off-key in the car and dance like nobody was watching. I wrote about the necklace he gave me, the one I still wear, and how I hoped one day she would wear something that reminded her of him too. I poured my heart out onto that page, letting the words flow freely. I told her about my dreams of being a teacher, about how I wanted to inspire kids like us to believe in themselves. I wanted her to know that she was capable of anything, that she could chase her dreams without fear of judgment. As I typed, I felt a sense of release. It was like I was finally giving voice to all the things I had kept bottled up inside for so long. I didn't know if she would ever read it, but it felt good to say it. It felt good to reclaim my story, to remind myself that I was more than just Linda's unwanted stepdaughter. I finished the letter and saved it in a folder labeled "For Emma." I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had to keep that door open, even if it was just a crack. I had to believe that one day she might want to know me, that one day she might seek out the truth. The next day, I went to work, and as I walked into the classroom, I looked at my students and felt a surge of hope. They were all so full of potential, so eager to learn and grow. I realized that I could be that person for them, just like I wanted to be for Emma. I could be the adult who believed in them, who saw their worth, who encouraged them to chase their dreams, and maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to believe in myself again too. I could stop letting Linda's rejection define me. I could stop letting her fear dictate my worth. I could embrace the love I had for Emma and carry it with me, even if it was unreciprocated. As I stood in front of my class, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I was not just a victim of family dysfunction. I was a survivor. I was a woman who had faced betrayal and rejection and had come out stronger on the other side. I was a teacher, a sister, and a daughter who would always carry the love of her father in her heart, and that was enough.